The red sands of the canyon bore deep, deliberate footprints, the kind that spoke of weight and purpose, not wandering. No rider Ayali had ever seen could have left them, not with such certainty, not with the deliberate pull of each step guiding straight into the shadowed canyon where the sun barely touched the rocks. She crouched behind a jagged outcropping, her tall frame nearly blending with the rugged cliffs, and studied the tracks with a sharpness only years of survival could hone. Every instinct screamed danger, yet something stranger tugged at her attention. These tracks were only the beginning of a story far bigger than she had anticipated. Ayali, a woman of formidable presence and unwavering intelligence, was not merely running from a forced marriage. She had been raised with the teachings of strategy and leadership lessons drilled into her by her father, Chief Kiona, a man who believed that courage and judgment were the true measure of a warrior regardless of gender. She was tall, commanding, and precise in thought, a product of the harsh deserts and the disciplined mind of a leader who knew the burdens of authority. Today, her skills were being tested in ways even her father could not have foreseen. The wind carried a dry, dusty scent through the canyon, and the harsh sunlight glinted off her silver jewelry, worn not for fashion, but as ceremonial markers of her status and lineage. Her clothing, torn from the rigors of flight, bore streaks of dried blood, a testimony to the trials she had faced just to remain free. Despite the physical exhaustion, her eyes burned with clarity and focus. She was not simply hiding. She was analyzing, predicting, planning. Every rustle of the scrub and every shifting shadow could be an enemy, an ambush, or a trap laid by the alliance of tribes who sought to claim her hand, and with it political leverage she refused to surrender. Ayali had been running since dawn, leaving behind her home and the security of her people to avoid a marriage arranged not out of love or unity, but out of power and obligation. Her intended, a man she had never chosen, represented a pact between rival factions, a union meant to strengthen alliances at the expense of her freedom. She was determined that no alliance, no matter how prestigious, would claim her as a possession. The desert, the canyon, the very land itself became both her shield and her battlefield. Every boulder and crag provided cover. Every shift in the canyon's wind told a story. Yet even in this isolation, Ayali sensed that the danger she faced was not merely from the pursuers she could see or hear. There was a deeper, more insidious threat, the kind that moves in shadows, the kind that waits for a single misstep to exploit. Political machinations, rivalries within her own tribe, and the unspoken tension of centuries-old grudges pressed against her like the heat of the midday sun. The footprints she followed hinted at more than just hunters. They suggested a deliberate, calculated force, one that sought not only to capture her, but to manipulate the outcome of events far beyond her canyon. She paused, crouched low, hand brushing the rough stone beneath her. For a moment, the canyon seemed to hold its breath, the air thick with anticipation. Could she, a single woman against forces trained and armed, to preserve her dignity, her authority, and her choice in the face of overwhelming odds? Could her wits and courage outmatch not only the men pursuing her, but the weight of centuries of expectation that sought to define her path before she could even walk it? Every detail of the canyon seemed to whisper warnings. The scrape of a rock, the subtle shadow of movement, far above the faint sound of voices carried on the wind, speaking in a language of strategy and intent. Ayali's mind raced, weaving every clue into a plan she had yet to fully reveal even to herself. She was more than a fugitive. She was a strategist, a protector of her own fate, and the embodiment of a truth that could not be ignored. No one would choose for her, and she would not be taken without contest. As the sun climbed higher, burning red against the stone, Ayali's gaze hardened. The footprints ended at a narrow pass that led deeper into the heart of the canyon. Beyond that pass, there could be allies or ambushes. Every step she had taken until now had brought her closer to freedom or danger, to life or death. And still, She moved with deliberate caution, every muscle poised, every thought calculated. In that moment, the question hung in the arid air, like a challenge thrown across the canyon itself. Could a woman alone, trained by a father, who taught equality, courage, and strategy, outwit a world determined to make her a pawn? Could Ayali preserve her honor and claim her destiny, even when every force seemed aligned against her? The answer was uncertain, but one thing was clear: her story was only just beginning. Ayali had barely taken a cautious step deeper into the canyon when the first signs of pursuit became unmistakable. From the jagged ridges above, figures emerged, their silhouettes sharp against the blazing sun. At first, she allowed herself a flicker of relief. Any traveler might assume these were allies come to rescue a lone woman in peril, but experience taught her better. The disciplined way they moved, the measured coordination, the silent signals exchanged among them, it was not a rescue. It was a retrieval mission, a calculated effort to force her back into a marriage she had refused, a marriage designed not for love, but for political leverage between tribes. The weight of her situation pressed down like the midday sun over the canyon floor. She was not only evading capture, she was defying centuries of expectation, family authority, and the dangerous intricacies of tribal politics. The alliance that sought her hand was backed by men who considered her resistance an affront to tradition. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and the conflict could ignite a blood feud. Ayali's mind raced, parsing possibilities, weighing risks, imagining outcomes. Her honor, her freedom, and potentially the stability of her people rested on choices made in the next few moments. From the shadows emerged another figure, one entirely unexpected. Silas, a rugged cowboy from the nearby plains, had been tracking wild mustangs when fate placed him in the canyon at the right or wrong moment. He was an outsider neutral to the intricate web of tribal obligations, yet his keen instincts and calm demeanor suggested a man capable of decisive action. When their eyes met across the dust-streaked rocks, there was no misunderstanding Ayali needed assistance. But she also assessed whether he could be trusted. Trust in such moments was as rare and precious as water in the desert. Ayali did not plead. She did not cry for help. Instead, she stood tall, her frame towering even in the harsh canyon light, and laid out her position in clear, unwavering terms. "No one," she said, her voice steady despite the tension curling through the air. "Not my father, not the men who pursue me, has the right to decide my fate. I will not be a piece on a board, and I will not be moved like cattle for politics or pride." Her gaze swept the canyon, noting the movements of the pursuers, the patterns in the shadows, the signs of intent. She was both strategist and symbol, a leader in her own right. Silas, recognizing the gravity of the situation, moved cautiously closer, keeping his presence unobtrusive yet protective. Together, the two formed an unlikely alliance, one born not of kinship or obligation, but of shared resolve and necessity. The cowboy's outsider perspective allowed him to see the danger more plainly, yet he deferred to Ayali's understanding of the tribal dynamics, the subtle cues of honor, and the unspoken rules that governed their interactions. Meanwhile, the political stakes escalated. Among the pursuing warriors, whispers of dissent and rivalry threaded through the ranks. Some questioned whether this mission was truly about tradition, while others saw the chance to assert dominance over rival factions. Ayali's defiance, though singular, threatened to unravel carefully balanced alliances. Each decision she made, each step she took, had repercussions far beyond the canyon walls. The potential for misunderstanding, for manipulation, for bloodshed weighed heavily, reminding her that survival required more than physical endurance. It demanded insight, courage, and foresight. The canyon's silence was broken only by the crunch of sand beneath purposeful footsteps and the distant wind carrying faint sounds that hinted at approaching danger. Ayali's mind sharpened. She calculated distances, assessed possibilities, and began to form a plan. She would not flee blindly, nor would she submit. Instead, she would navigate the political and physical terrain with precision, turning the canyon itself into a barrier, an ally, and a stage for demonstrating that her will could not be ignored. As the figures drew closer, the tension coiled tighter. Ayali and Silas exchanged a glance, a silent acknowledgement of the stakes. Capture meant not just personal subjugation, but the spark of conflict that could engulf their people. Yet surrender was not an option, not for Ayali, whose spirit had been forged in the dual fires of tradition and independent thought. In that charged moment, it became clear to the audience watching from the edge of the story. The canyon was more than rocks and sand. It was a crucible where honor, strategy, and courage would be tested, and where a single choice could determine the lives of many. Ayali crouched in the shadow of the canyon walls, her eyes scanning the jagged terrain as she traced the footprints of the approaching warriors. She knew brute force would accomplish nothing against trained pursuers. The canyon was narrow, the odds overwhelmingly against her. Instead, she relied on the weapon she had mastered through years of disciplined training her mind. Every boulder, every ridge, every curve of the canyon became a piece of the puzzle, and she began to weave a plan with precision and foresight. She turned to Silas, who had been observing her with a mix of caution and respect. "Listen carefully," she said, her voice low but commanding. "We won't outrun them. We won't outfight them, but we can outthink them. The canyon and the terrain are ours to use." She guided him through the strategy. The barn at his ranch could become a stronghold, the corral a funnel, and the high rocks nearby perfect for ambush. Every position had purpose. Every hiding place was selected for maximum advantage. Silas, though unfamiliar with the intricacies of tribal politics, quickly grasped the logic and nodded, trusting her judgment. Ayali's plan relied not only on preparation, but on deception. She would make it appear as though she were an easy target, a captive waiting to be reclaimed. To the pursuers, her vulnerability would lure them into the canyon's traps, unaware that the terrain favored those who knew it intimately. Small signals, like the glint of her silver pendant in the sunlight, served as markers for Silas and her allies, guiding them through the orchestrated movements that would soon unfold. Each reflective flash became a silent cue, each shadowed crevice a stage for the next move. Time pressed against them, like the heat of the midday sun. Ayali calculated each second, knowing the enemy's approach was inevitable. She instructed Silas to position cover at key points, to move supplies and cattle out of the line of sight, and to prepare weapons for quick access. The canyon's winds carried scents and sounds that could betray their movements, so every action had to be deliberate. Even the smallest misstep could unravel the plan and turn strategy into catastrophe. To strengthen their position, Ayali enlisted the help of a few loyal warriors from her tribe who had followed her escape through secret paths. Their coordination was precise. They would act as diversions, drawing attention away from the main escape route and allowing Ayali to control the flow of the enemy. Every movement was choreographed. Every gesture had meaning. As she instructed Silas, she emphasized trust and timing, making it clear that even the cleverest plan could fail without unity. Details mattered. Ayali considered the angle of sunlight, how shadows could mask their approach or reveal their positions. She used the wind to carry sounds away from their hiding spots, guiding Silas on where to position himself so the enemy would not detect him until it was too late. The glint of her silver jewelry was more than ornamental. It was a signal, a tactical marker for allies who needed to know her exact location in the chaos to come. Every element of the environment became part of their strategy, each component integrated into a seamless defense and escape plan. As the first sounds of pursuit grew louder, Ayali took a deep breath and glanced at Silas. Her calm intensity was contagious. "We have only one chance to make this work," she said. "If we follow the plan, we control the battlefield. If we falter, we lose everything." The stakes were clear. Life, honor, and freedom depended on precision, courage, and trust. Silas tightened his grip on his rifle, his mind sharpened by her leadership. Together, they were no longer simply fugitive and outsider. They were tacticians on a stage where every choice carried consequence. The canyon seemed to hold its breath, the approaching warriors unaware that every step they took was guided into a trap of intellect and courage. Ayali's plan was risky, but in the face of overwhelming force, it was their only chance. With the enemy drawing near, she felt the familiar thrill of strategy in motion, the delicate balance between danger and opportunity, calculation and instinct. In that moment, every heartbeat, every movement, every glance was a thread in the tapestry of survival she was weaving. The distant thunder of hooves signaled their arrival before the riders were even visible. Red Bear, a towering figure whose reputation alone could unsettle the bravest of men, led a force that seemed to stretch endlessly across the canyon floor. He believed Ayali had already been captured, that Silas the outsider was powerless, and that victory would be effortless. Yet, as the dust settled and the riders drew near, the canyon itself seemed to betray them, funneling their advance into the hands of those who knew its secrets. Ayali, tall and unwavering, stood atop a rocky ledge, her silver pendant catching the sunlight, a signal for Silas and the few loyal warriors who had positioned themselves strategically. Her movements were deliberate, calculated, each step guiding the enemy into the trap she had meticulously orchestrated. She freed herself from the bindings that had restrained her during the retreat, a fluid motion honed through practice and necessity, and advanced with measured confidence toward Red Bear. Her presence alone, unyielding and fearless, disrupted the enemy's assumptions. They expected a trembling captive, not a strategist ready to command the battlefield. Silas took his position behind a natural barricade rifle, ready eyes scanning every movement. Around him, the loyal warriors mirrored Ayali's calm precision, taking cover behind boulders, using the canyon's angles to conceal their numbers and intentions. Each movement, each breath was choreographed. When Red Bear's men pressed forward, they found themselves slowed and funneled by the very landscape they had ignored, an environment now weaponized against them. Ayali pressed closer, a shadow among the rocks, her eyes never leaving Red Bear's. With a subtle hand signal, the remaining warriors advanced from the flanks, catching the enemy in a deadly crossfire without a shot fired. Confusion rippled through Red Bear's ranks. The situation was no longer a simple retrieval, but a calculated trap where every misstep carried consequences. The balance of power shifted without a single bullet crossing paths, a testament to strategy and the careful orchestration of environment timing and intellect. When Red Bear finally confronted her directly, his confidence faltered. Ayali's steady gaze, unflinching posture, and the silent presence of her allies stripped away the aura of invincibility he had carried for years. "You underestimated me," she said, her voice calm yet commanding, echoing against the canyon walls. The cavalry of his pride and reputation collided with the reality before him, a woman standing unbowed, directing forces with a clarity and audacity that no brute strength could match. Every action Ayali took amplified the tension. A subtle shift behind a boulder signaled an impending flank. The flash of silver guided Silas to the optimal firing line. A narrow crevice in the canyon forced the enemy to compress their formation, leaving them vulnerable. She wielded her mind as effectively as any weapon, and the impact was immediate. Red Bear's confidence began to crumble under the weight of awareness that his plans had been anticipated and countered. By the time Red Bear realized the depth of the trap, it was too late. Morale cracked, soldiers faltered, and the illusion of dominance shattered. He signaled retreat, the realization of defeat etched across his features, knowing that further insistence would only cost lives and cement his humiliation. Ayali had turned the pursuit into a demonstration of her authority, intellect, and courage, achieving victory without reckless bloodshed. As the enemy withdrew, dust and echoes lingering in their wake, the canyon fell into a tense silence. Silas exhaled, realizing that the outcome had been secured not by overwhelming force, but by foresight, precision, and the unshakable will of a woman who refused to be anyone's pawn. For the audience, the climax was both harrowing and satisfying. Danger had been met with intelligence, courage, and strategy, proving that true strength lies not merely in the gun or the fist, but in the choices one makes when faced with impossible odds. Ayali returned to her tribe not as a captive, nor as a woman who had been silenced by circumstance, but as one who had reclaimed her destiny. Every step back across the familiar desert paths was a reminder that freedom and choice are victories earned through courage, intelligence, and resolve. She had faced overwhelming odds, defied expectations, and stood firm against traditions and pressures that sought to define her life without her consent. Her return was not merely a homecoming. It was a triumph of self-determination, a statement that even in the harshest landscapes of the West, a person's will could prevail. Silas watched her from a distance, feeling the quiet weight of what they had achieved together. Protecting Ayali had cost him comfort and safety, yet it had gifted him a deeper understanding of bravery and integrity. He realized that standing for what is right, when it is inconvenient, dangerous, or misunderstood, is a measure of true character. In that harsh, sun-scorched canyon, he had witnessed firsthand that courage is not merely physical, but moral. It is the willingness to act with honor and intelligence when every outcome is uncertain. For viewers, Ayali's story offers enduring lessons. Courage combined with wisdom can change the course of a single life, and even ripple out to affect communities and futures beyond our immediate understanding. Her determination underscores a truth often overlooked: the right to make one's own choices is sacred, and protecting that freedom demands both conviction and action. It is not a gift given lightly, nor is it a freedom to be assumed. It is won through vigilance, strategy, and unyielding courage. Ayali also exemplifies the power of leadership rooted in intellect, moral clarity, and empathy. She demonstrated that a person's influence is amplified when actions are guided by reason as much as by strength. Silas and the loyal warriors who aided her witnessed the tangible impact of strategic thinking and moral courage. The enemy's numerical advantage was rendered meaningless by careful planning, unity, and foresight. This teaches us that intelligence and ethics can prevail even in situations where force and intimidation appear dominant. The story resonates strongly for those who have lived decades of choices, challenges, and responsibility. For men and women over 45, Ayali's journey is a reminder of the values that endure: integrity, family honor, and the courage to stand for what matters even under pressure. It invites reflection on personal responsibility, the consequences of decisions, and the ways in which moral courage shapes both one's own life and the lives of others. In a world often measured by expedience, her example highlights the timeless rewards of principled action. As the sun dipped behind the mesas, casting long shadows across the desert, the lessons of Ayali's journey lingered. Freedom, honor, and the right to choose are worth defending even against impossible odds. The canyon had tested her strength, her intellect, and her spirit. Yet she emerged triumphant, reminding all who witness her story that the right choice made with wisdom and courage can shape destiny. If Ayali's journey and the courage of her allies inspired you, join us at Epic Western Stories. Follow the channel, share your thoughts, like, and comment below, and continue exploring the untold tales of the frontier stories, where honor, courage, and humanity collide in ways that resonate across time and place. Let these stories remind us that bravery, wisdom, and moral conviction are virtues that endure, and that every choice we make carries the potential to change the world around us.